Will the psychology of humans be compatible with the predicted tech future we face? Welcome, mere mortalites, to another round of the book reviews. My name is Kyron, host of the Mere Mortals podcast, the Value for Value podcast, and also this one, the Mere Mortals book reviews. This is a live podcast that we're doing now, so I'm live here on the 30th of November, 2023 on 10 a.m. on Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is UTC midnight on a Wednesday, wherever you are in the world. So if you do feel like joining, you could do this live via the YouTube, which I'm on right now, and then also live via any of the podcasting apps like CurioCaster, Fountain, Podverse, and Podfans, things like this. So this is the podcast for those who want to dive deeper into their books to learn more about what's going on within them, perhaps extract some themes you haven't thought about. I typically like to focus on books that are a bit older in nature, so things that are usually 20 years old, something like that, and really try and dive into some of the things that are going on deep within them. However, I am doing something a little bit different today because I have The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly with the subtitle Understanding the 12 Technological Forces That Will Shape Our Future, which was actually published in 2016. Kyron, you said you'd never do this. I didn't say I would never do it, but I definitely do prefer focusing on older books. This book's approximately 300 pages in length, probably took me about 7 hours of reading to get through in total. So what was my motivation and initial impression for reading this? Well, I do host another podcast called the Value for Value podcast, and this is really focused upon how digital content creators can connect deeper with their audience, and I suppose the changing landscape of technology, particularly with related to podcasts, but I think this is changing in many different forms of digital mediums. And I need to do prep for these episodes, and so reading books like this, season 4 of that, I'm probably going to start in about a month's time, and that I'm going to really focus on I suppose a lot of technological trends and how they have shaped how digital content creators connect with their audience, perhaps a little bit in the past, and then also what we're going to see coming forward. So a technological book is very much rooted in this. And interestingly, I would call that podcast, even though it's about digital content and creation and things like that, I think ultimately it's a psychology podcast, but at its root. But we'll talk a little bit more about psychology and personality and things like that, because I think that plays a part in this book as well. So my initial impression while reading it, I'd heard of Kevin Kelly before. He's got a great article called 1,000 True Fans. I'd listened to him on the Tim Ferriss show a couple of times. He used to be Wired magazine, sort of these things. So I knew roughly his style. I would say that this book, right at the start, my initial impression was it wasn't gripping per se. It's not like, oh my God, I really need to learn further about this, because he dives pretty much into his first technological force within the first 6 or 7 pages. So I would say it's not gripping, but it definitely, there was enough substance there to get me going right at the start of it. So let's talk a little bit about the plot and the style. And as I mentioned, it's split into 12 chapters, so I'll read these out for you at the moment. So we have, starting from the very beginning, becoming, cognifying, flowing, screening, accessing, sharing, filtering, remixing, interacting, tracking, questioning, and beginning. So these are all these kind of verb actions, I guess that you'd call it. And I know Sam Sethi from Podfans is listening in live, and on his app he's very much about these verb actions as well of how people interact with technology. And so with all of these, he gives pretty much like a solid explanation of what has already happened. So in the screening section, he's talking about how mobile screens are just kind of taking up and being everywhere. When I think about it, in this very room at the moment, I've got the screen on my camera, I've got the screen on my laptop, which is showing multiple screens all within it, and then I have the phone screen down beneath me. So there's quite a lot going on there, obviously, and we can see how he talks about these things and is like, you know, this is what's happening. This is already a trend that's happening. And then he inserts, I guess, like modern examples from the internet era of how things have changed, and then things he's personally experimented, such as with VR, or when he was at Wired magazine, how he saw the internet changing and evolving. And so then the style is usually to talk about this trend and then expand upon it, how we already have glimpses of the future, what it's going to scale to. And then right at the end of the section, he'll end with a typical day in the life highlighting of what's going on here. And so each of these is roughly about 30 pages in length, these sections. So I've got a section here from page 133 of a quote, and I'm actually going to let a little guest come in and help read this out. So here we have Cole.
Universal is so smart. I usually don't have to wait more than 30 seconds for my ride, even during surges. The car just appears because it knows my schedule and can deduce my plans from my texts, calendar, and calls. I'm trying to save money, so sometimes I'll double or triple up with others on the way to work. There is plenty of bandwidth so we can all screen. For exercise, I subscribe to several gyms and a bicycle service. I get an up-to-date bike, tuned and cleaned, and ready at my departure point. For long-haul travel, I like these new personal hover drones. They are hard to get when you need them right now since they are so new, but so much more convenient than commercial jets. As long as I travel to complexes and other cities that have reciprocal services, I don't need to pack very much since I can get everything, the same things I normally use, from the local nodes. My father sometimes asks me if I feel untethered and irresponsible for not owning anything. I tell him I feel the opposite. I feel a deep connection to the primeval. I feel like an ancient hunter-gatherer who owns nothing as he winds his way through the complexities of nature, conjuring up a tool just in time for its use, then leaving it behind as he moves on. It is the farmer who needs a barn for his accumulation. The digital native is free to race ahead and explore the unknown. Accessing rather than owning keeps me agile and fresh, ready for whatever is next.
Brilliant. So thank you, Cole, for that little quote. And if I'd tried to read that off, that would have been a nightmare. So we can definitely see how he lays out these big, grand kind of narratives of like, this is what it's going to be like. I've got the cube, I've got this house, which these things come and go, and I discard them. And you can see how it is very, very different from life as we speak now, although there are parallels, fast fashion where you get clothes coming in and then replace them very, very quickly is you see these parallels coming through. So that's very much the plot and style of how we go through here. So coming over to the main questions and themes that I've got from this book. One of my questions is technology a force of its own? And then very much I would say yes. And so this is where he has these points about, copying and embracing of all these different things. And so once again, I'll let Cole talk about this section because I think this is one of the perhaps most pertinent sections that we find in this book.
The internet wants to make copies. At first, this fact is deeply troubling to creators, both individual and corporate, because their stuff will be copied indiscriminately, often for free, when it was once rare and precious. Some people fought, and still fight, very hard against the bias to copy. Movie studios and music labels come to mind, and some people chose and choose to work with the bias. Those who embrace the internet's tendency to copy and seek value that can't be easily copied through personalization, embodiment, authentication, etc., tend to prosper, while those who deny, prohibit, and try to thwart the network's eagerness to copy are left behind to catch up later. Consumers, of course, love the promiscuous copies and feed the machine to claim their benefits. This bias to copy is technological rather than merely social or cultural. It would be true in a different nation, even in a command economy, even with a different origin story. Even on another planet. It is inevitable. But while we can't stop copying, it does matter greatly what legal and social regimes surround ubiquitous copying. How we handle rewards for innovation, intellectual property rights and responsibilities, ownership of and access to the copies makes a huge difference to society's prosperity and happiness. Ubiquitous copying is inevitable, but we have significant choices about its character.
Definitely. So I think this is the strongest point that really came out of the book, this section on copying, because copies will rule and there's just no stopping them. We've seen this basically with everything digital. That's my pretty much opinion. And when you're trying to lock things down and not show it, i.e. the Streisand effect. This was when Barbara Streisand was trying to block, this, I don't even think it was digital copies. Maybe it was of newspapers. I think it was of her house somewhere. And the more she fought against it, the more it spread, the more it became well known. And I think a similar effect in is that not necessarily, that's a slightly different point in that trying to stop something makes it actually worse, but which I don't think is necessarily the case. But I do think that this copying will just, trying to control them is futile. They're just going to happen. And they're basically independent of culture, of morals. Hence, this is the core motto that I have for this very podcast, which is I want this to be available anywhere, anytime for anyone, with the small caveat that, if you're inserting ads into it, I will try and remove it if you're degrading the actual product or creating something that is, I think exploitive in nature. But if you want to create a small snippet from this, copy it to somewhere else and do something like that, even in that case, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I would try and fight against someone who's creating clips of this and making fun of me. I think that's kind of pointless. So that's one of the biggest things I took from this. Will humanity embrace these trends, these predictions that he's talking about of copying, of screening, of accessing, of sharing, and things like this? I don't know. I think I'd say likely. He's got this section talking about privacy and anonymity, which I thought was pretty interesting, because he was saying how, we don't actually care that much about privacy. Everything that we've shown here, that how humans are interacting on the internet, is that we just share it. We actually don't care that much, with the caveat of we do want symmetry in knowing what we share and with who, and we can see what they do with that data. So it's the kind of private sharing. And then he's got this interesting analogy of this old lady who you used to live to and would always kind of be peering out the window. And I love doing this myself. I've got a little landing with a window that comes right up to my eyes. And I love just standing there for like a minute when I'm going up the stairs and just peering outside. And this is where he's saying like, okay, if you went away for a week, this lady would maybe just check your house, and if someone weird walked in, would maybe call up the cops. And, if she was away, you would go and help her out by picking up her mail or something like this. And this is where it's like, okay, anonymity is great and essential in kind of very tiny doses, because you need this for people to be able to do certain things like whistleblowing, which do require a backing, a tiny amount of anonymity, anonymity to be able to present something which needs to be talked about. But it's when it's like everything is anonymous, or there is an ability to kind of hide behind anonymity as a way to get out of responsibility of, if you're insulting someone and being really mean, and I'll talk about this kind of a little bit later in the Boostagram Lounge section. There's an anonymity where it allows people to abscipate. Well, I don't know what to get rid of the responsibility that they actually have on them. And so, yeah, I don't know. This is where I'm like, with all these technological trends, we as humans, we've got our own personalities, our psychology, and there's certain things that we do and don't like. But I think we're also likely to mold ourselves around this inevitable, unstoppable entity that is the technological forces that are coming, that are changing our lives. You can fight against phones and the internet as much as you want, but likely your life is going to get molded around it one way or another, whether you want to use it or not. It will affect other people, and those other people getting affected will affect you eventually. So that's kind of like the main questions and themes that came from this. The only problem or thing that I think he kind of missed out with this book was the problem with the tech-focused books is that they can't help but imagine a utopic scenario. All of the scenarios he laid out, there was barely any hint of the troubles that would cause, the things that would perhaps be bad in this new world, such as, no one would have maybe predicted. I wonder how much there was predictions of online bullying back in the 1970s. I haven't heard of them per se. Maybe this was a big trend that people knew was going to happen. Unlikely. I think there's a lot of predictions with these things where we can imagine some good, which is mostly what he does, but imagining the bad is a little bit harder to do, perhaps. And this is weird because it's generally true. Tech generally improves things. Being able to solve polio, being able to instantly communicate with anyone over the world, look at all the stuff I'm doing here live and connecting with Cole, who's in America. I would have never had a chance to do that barring all of these technological advances. But a dose of reality and why humans always complain would probably have made the book a bit more realistic. It did have this feel of just being just a bit too much in the future, tech focus, just a bit too much like everything's going to solve our problems. And I get the feeling that our outer lives might improve significantly. If I could have technology that helps my mom's Alzheimer's, or that would solve instantly problems that I was having, or these just like mini pain points of last night I was trying to call up someone to get a refund on a credit thing for this internet stuff that I had, and it was just like it took 35 minutes of back and forthing on the phone. If technology could solve that, that'd be awesome. But I think the inner feeling of life contentment, it depends on the person. I really only think that if all this utopic stuff came true, a person's life might going from 40% contentment to 45% contentment. The technology will certainly improve their lives, but the inner psychology, personality, things like that, we're always going to be discontented. And it could be different. It could be going from 80 to 85 for perhaps a more positive person. But there's a bunch of things I think that are happening which are not 100%. It's not just going to make everything way better, and that the future is going to be all rosy and things like this. So let's go on to the author and perhaps a couple of extra details from this book. So Kevin Kelly, he was I mentioned the editor, creator of Wired magazine, so very much a techie, nerdy, geeky magazine talking all about the internet, companies, technology, things like this. So would you call him a technologist, a futurologist, perhaps? These are a couple of words I would maybe throw out. He definitely uses his previous experience with Wired to his advantages. Many of the things in this book are talking about access he had to people, locations, and technology that the vast bulk of us won't have because we don't live in Silicon Valley where a lot of this stuff was happening at the time. There's the slightest taste of maybe hubris in his writings, as there's just like a personal thing that I've noticed, which was, calling something inevitable, the whole book, the inevitable, especially when he talks about how he was so wrong about something like Wikipedia. He just didn't think Wikipedia and the ability for humans to create something through crowdsourcing of knowledge would work. But obviously Wikipedia does work, and it's a very important, significant resource. So then, saying the inevitable, the slightest taste of hubris, but it's not too bad. That being said, there are a lot of sharp insights to be gleaned from this, and I think that's what Kevin Kelly, I found just from my hearings of him speaking on podcasts and things like this, is that he does have a sharp insight into technology, how human psychology, maybe less, but I think he really knows his technology. And so here's another example of what he was talking about.
We have preconceptions about how an intelligent robot should look and act, and these can blind us to what is already happening around us. To demand that artificial intelligence be human-like is the same flawed logic as demanding that artificial flying be bird-like with flapping wings. Robots, too, will think different.
Definitely. That's a great observation of just because things are like they are now. Before flying was invented, everyone was trying to flap their stuff, and then it was like, oh no, wait, you want to use aerodynamics of a teardrop shaped wing to generate lift. And so I very much think like all of our conceptions about what a robot will look like, what AI will look like, all these sorts of things, they're gonna be so radically different. And I think he does a decent job in the book of trying to lay out how things could look different, because a lot of things in here you're like, man, that's weird, that doesn't sound right. But a lot of these tech books and Isaac Asimov and things like that, they create these scenarios which seem really, really ridiculous, and then yet now that we're living in the future, we go, okay, yeah, it was pretty close. There's a couple of things that aren't correct. The flying cars didn't happen, but a lot of other things related to telephones and communication and being littered with wires and being able to see the planet lighting up from outer space as we go over in the nighttime and things like that. I think there's a lot of insights that you can actually get from books similar to this and definitely from this one. So let's get into my summary, similar books, recommendations, things like this. I definitely think this book was prescient with some predictions, as this was in 2016, and he absolutely nailed what AI images and search could do. He was talking about that back then, and we're in the future now, and he was pretty much right about AI images being able to type things in, AI being able to be fed a picture of a cat wearing a hat in outer space, or like being able to identify individual components of images and put that into another form of text or audio and things like that. So he's definitely nailing that, which ties in with my general impression of that it's a penetrating book. I think it just lacks a little bit of the psychology aspects of how humans will relate to some of these things. Okay, if we do have screens everywhere, are we going to perhaps want to create areas where there are no screens, like a screen-free zone, much like how smoking eventually kind of like got outlawed or banned in certain environments, i.e. inside of restaurants, inside of buildings and things like this, because it was unhealthy, not only for the person, individual action, that's totally fine, but secondhand smoke's affecting other people. Okay, this is where we create different rules. Will certain things like that come up with screens if we find out, screen use is not only affecting the person, the individual, but also other people around them? Would we create no screen zones and things like this? That's just an example I came off the top of my head, but I think there's a lot of cool things about how humans will change, which he kind of missed out on. So perhaps a little bit too geeky and brushes over the new issues that'll come up. But overall, the underlying tone of positivity and optimism is really refreshing. I think that it's pretty much right that technology is going to make things better generally, with only a couple of like minor instances of it impacting certain individuals. And so the challenges and setbacks, perhaps I'm being a bit harsh, and they rightly should just be set to the side, as these are things that will be solved, and what's the point of even bringing up these things, because we don't know exactly what they're going to be. But what we know about humans is that we're pretty good at problem solving, and that when we chase after something and put our energy and effort to it, we usually can fix it. Lots of ideas will fail, and that's okay, so there's no need to make fun of them. You won't find the reasoning for this optimism here, as the sections like sharing and tracking probably actually will scare some people, in terms of like, oh my God, it's tracking everything. Oh my God, I'm getting tracked on everything. People are going to know everything about me. And it's like, I want to like keep my privacy and hunch up and things like this. Whereas no, the world is becoming more and more digital and more accessible and open to everyone. So being the loner on the top of a roof of a cliff or something, that might be work. I'm imagining like an old Irish guy or something like that in the lighthouse. But if you live in the city, you're kind of going to have to be prepared that everything is going to be shared, everything's going to be tracked, everything's going to be accessed, and things like that. So overall, The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly, I'm giving a 7.5 out of 10 to. I really, really enjoyed this. And it's given me some great info and takeaways, points that I'm going to be using on the Value for Value show in the next couple of months. Recommendations, similar books, maybe something like The Fourth Age by Byron Reese. One reviewed that a fair while ago. And then in terms, I was going through all the old book reviews, and I went, you know what, there's no book that I've read which is really like this, predicting the future. there was a couple of things like Reality Plus by David Chalmers, which was using that imagination to try and create things, but it didn't have the same style and output that this book did. So perhaps probably the only thing I could recommend is maybe something like Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, which is about the positive nature of how humans are actually getting better, of how the Enlightenment ideals actually have led to better things. And so you get a pretty broad spectrum of positivity and things like that. So that's very much it for today's book review. Thank you for joining me. Now's the section where we're going on to the Boostagram Lounge, and we're going to thank some people for supporting. So I did just see here, Sam Sethi has been sending in some Podfans payments. He's listening live, and he says hey, Kyron, listening live. Thank you very much, Sam. And Cole did a test as well in Fountain, so thank you very much, my friends, for doing that. I've now set up everything, so I should receive it automatically in a much more streamlined manner than I was doing previously. So that's really cool. And then the book reviews and going live and doing things like this does tend to drag in people and make it a bit more of an interactive environment. And so I really want to be focusing on that a bit more if I can as well. I'll jump onto some of the comments that we were having and I see a comment here. Peter was saying, haha, Cole has the perfect narration voice. He does. Hey, that was so good. Brilliant, Cole. Thank you. So much better than I was reading that out. So this might be something we can do. And Cole, I'm putting as a 10% split in for this episode as well. So Boostagram's coming in the future and things like that. He's going to be very much part of the value split for that. So if you enjoy the show and those Boostagrams, those streaming I was talking about just before, get with the times technologically, people here. If you jump on a podcasting app, newpodcastapps.com or meremortalspodcast.com/support, I've got a review there of the 8 apps at this current moment where you can send in boosts and Boostagrams. Things like Fountain, Podfans, Podverse, Curiocaster. These are ones where you can listen in live. And then also other ones like Cast-O-Matic, Breeze, Podcast Guru, I believe you can listen in live as well. So lots of different things you can go. When I do my social post, you're going to see links to where you can listen into these apps on the desktop or mobile. So whatever option you want for that is good. And yeah, I just want to talk about a couple of comments I received from the Deep or Nonsensical, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, which I did before. And there was one from Frisbee Girl, which was kind of funny. And she was just saying, like, initially excited to catch this, but honestly was left quite underwhelmed. There are a few kicker ways to lose the interest of a listener than failing to do your homework. Zero excuse for not taking 60 seconds to run a search on how to correctly pronounce a subject's name. Massive credibility lost. You know what? This is a good point. I really should have done better. It's not 30 seconds. I'll tell you that. Trying to find correct pronunciation of a name, it's actually pretty hard. It probably took me about 5 minutes to get it. And you know what? I wasn't too far off. It was something like Khalil Gibran. So I think I did a decent good. The syncing of this is so off. I don't really know what she was talking about there. And then just saying how I need to properly execute on YouTube and video. So, okay, thank you. But I do appreciate that as well. And then just a couple of other random comments. So sorry for you. All right, whatever. And then a couple of people just saying like, the book, they didn't really enjoy it. One person got into philosophy because of this. This was Alchemisti. And then a couple of others were just like, I thought he was trying too hard and whatnot. So really positive to get some feedback on a book review, and I really do appreciate that. Thank you for listing some comments and sending in Boostagrams. The feedback is what I'm really looking for here, and in terms of doing these and trying to improve the show. I think the edition with Cole today was pretty good, and so maybe that's something that we can keep going for the future as well. So you'll see on your screen now as well, this was just a call in to say that this is an addition, a helping for you to be able to send in Boostagrams, to do these messages directly to me within the app, which just makes a lot more sense. The YouTube stuff is okay, but I really prefer it if you're doing it via a podcasting app. And then supporting monetarily the show. So there's 2,000 sats here. If you've never played around with Bitcoin, scan the QR code or try out the link in the show notes and or in the chapter for this, and you'll be able to do that. So very much appreciated if you try that out, and it's free money for you. Just take it. So this is a Value for Value podcast. Thank you everyone for joining in live, for joining in post as well. What did you think? I really want to know. That's the Value for Value call for this. What did you think of Cole's voiceovers? What did you think of this slightly new format? It takes a bit of extra effort on my part and Cole's part for sure, but is this worthwhile? Did you get more enjoyment from that? With the video aspect, what would you like me to do while it's going? And do you like having the text on the screen so that you can read along at the same time? All of these things, I just really want to know what I can do to improve. So if you leave a comment in the YouTube, if you reach out via any of the social media stuff, that's awesome as well. Links down below. And then, sending in a Boostagram within the podcasting app of your choice really helps out as well. And yeah, I really do hope that you join live sometime. Similar book recommendations, other things that you think would be really great talent-wise, knowing all of this stuff. And then finally, treasure supporting this monetarily. Value for value means I put all of this up front. I try and make this the best podcast I can possible. And I just ask that you return it in some manner. We've talked about the time and the talent. And then treasure, there's a PayPal link down below. It costs a lot to keep all of these screens running, and to pay for hosting and for my time as well would be very much appreciated. I'd really love to make this a full-time gig, and the only way I can do this is via your support at home. And I'll still keep doing this as long as I can, but unless I can get it to a monetary level of being able to pay the bills at the very least, it's going to be hard for me to continue this super long term. So just to call out, if you got some value from this, I really do appreciate you sending that back via the Boostagrams, via Bitcoin Lightning payments on the Lightning network within your podcasting app, or you can do it via the PayPal link below. We're going to leave it there for today. Thank you everyone for joining me for The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly. I've got some other pretty fun book reviews coming up, an Aussie classic. I've got a Chinese sci-fi classic, I guess. It's probably old enough to be a classic, I think. And yeah, just some fun stuff coming up for sure. So we'll leave it there for today. Thank you everyone for joining me. Ciao for now. Kyron out.